The first time I heard someone say my driveway wasn't mine, I honestly thought it was a joke. I was halfway through changing the oil on my truck when I saw her Vivian Zellers standing at the edge of my property with a clipboard and the usual fake sweet smile she wore like perfume. She was the HOA president, and if you've ever met someone who could weaponize a purse dog and a passive-aggressive tone, that was Vivian. "Mr. Elijah," she called out, her tone syrupy, "we need to talk about your driveway." I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned on my fender. "What about it?" "Well," she said, stepping one foot onto the concrete like it might bite her. "According to the HOA's interpretation of the community charter, your driveway is technically part of the common area." I blinked. "Come again?" Vivian flipped a laminated page on her clipboard like she was unveiling sacred scripture. "It's right here. Section 4, subsection C, the easement lines were never properly redrawn after the developer sold the adjacent lot. That makes this." She waved her hand at my concrete driveway like it was cursed. "Common property," I stared at her. "You're seriously saying my driveway doesn't belong to me?" She nodded. "Which means you can't block access to it. The HOA may need to use it for overflow parking." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're out of your mind." Vivian's smile vanished like someone flipped a switch. "I'm just enforcing the rules. You'll want to remove that chain across the entrance by tomorrow." I watched her walk off like she just dropped a bomb and couldn't wait to hear it go off. That night, I pulled out the Plat map. The original one filed with the county when I bought the house 6 years ago. I knew every inch of that document and every boundary on my half-acre lot. My driveway was wholly mine. No easement, no shared access, no gray area. So the next morning, while Vivian was out doing her usual HOA rounds with her golf cart and her mutt in tow, I installed a 6-foot black aluminum gate at the entrance of my driveway. Not a flimsy one, either. This thing locked from the inside and had a keypad entry. She saw me bolting it in and stomped up, puffed up like a peacock. "You do not have the authority to gate off common property," she shouted. I didn't even look at her. "Good morning to you too, Vivian." She shoved the clipboard in my face. "This is a direct violation of Article 9. "I'm writing you up." I calmly walked over to my porch, dug through a folder, and handed her a copy of the Plat map. I had highlighted the boundary lines in yellow and marked the driveway in bold red. "This is from the county," I said. "Filed, recorded, and stamped. You can see the driveway is fully within my property line. You touch that gate and you're trespassing." Vivian stared at it like it was written in ancient Greek. "I'll be contacting the board," she snapped. "Please do," I said. "And make sure they know I've got cameras up too." Her eyes twitched. She turned and stomped off without another word. I watched her drive away in her golf cart, already dialing someone on her phone. Game on. The gate stood firm for exactly 3 days before the first act of sabotage. I'd just gotten home from the night shift at the hospital, 7 floors of fluorescent buzz, short-staffed chaos, and an elevator that refused to go to 4 unless you kicked the side panel. My boots had barely hit the porch when I noticed the keypad on the gate hanging at an angle, wires exposed and clearly yanked. I checked the footage from the cameras I mounted under the eaves. At 2:47 in the morning, a hooded figure slipped through the bushes, pulled out a screwdriver, and went to work. I couldn't see the face, but the limp gave them away. There was only one person in the neighborhood who dragged their left leg like that. His name was Larry Dunst. A retired insurance adjuster who'd somehow weaseled his way onto the HOA's enforcement subcommittee, which I was pretty sure was just a fancy way to say Vivian's errand boy. I'd seen him at the last meeting, nodding along as she rattled off a list of infractions like overgrown azaleas and unauthorized mulch tones. I didn't say a word. I just made a copy of the footage, burned it to a USB, and dropped it off at the county sheriff's office on my way to grab breakfast. The deputy on duty, a guy named Marquez with sharp eyes and an obvious love for jelly donuts, watched the footage twice. "Looks like attempted property damage to me," he said, popping the USB into an evidence envelope. "You know who this is, Larry Dunst," I said. "Lives on Cedar Loop, drives a Buick with mismatched hubcaps." Marquez jotted it down. "We'll talk to him." "You want to press charges?" "I want him to stay the hell off my property," I said. "And I want it on record that the HOA's stepping way out of line." He nodded. "We'll follow up. You might want to consider reinforcing that keypad, though." These folks don't seem to take no for an answer. They didn't. That afternoon, Vivian escalated. She showed up not in her usual pastels, but in a navy skirt suit that looked like it had been borrowed from a courtroom drama. She had two men with her, one carrying a tripod and the other holding a rolled blueprint tube under his arm. They set up right at the property line, measuring tape snapping, camera clicking every few seconds. I didn't approach them. I just stood at the gate, arms crossed, making sure they knew I was watching. Eventually, she walked over with a clipboard that looked thicker than usual. "We've hired a private surveyor," she said flatly. "We believe your documents are outdated and possibly filed in error." I didn't respond. She tried again. "If the survey shows what we expect, we'll be filing for correction with the county land office. We're prepared to pursue this through civil court if necessary." I looked her in the eyes. "You're spending HOA dues on this. It's in the best interest of the community," she said. "You mean your interest," I replied. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Before she could walk off, I added, "You do know the county keeps digital timestamp logs on every plat filing, right? Including amendment requests. If you're thinking about forging anything, you better think again." Her smile didn't return this time. She turned on her heel and walked away, heels clicking on the pavement like a metronome of bad decisions. That night, I emailed the county land records office myself. I requested a certified copy of my plat map and asked them to flag any alteration requests made in the last 30 days. They replied 2 hours later with a scanned copy of my original filing and an alert someone had submitted a boundary clarification form 2 days prior, but it had been flagged for inconsistencies and marked for legal review. I called the clerk that morning. "Yeah," she said, chewing gum loud enough to hear through the phone. "Some woman came in here waving a printout and claiming her HOA had rights to several driveways, yours included. Said the original developer left things ambiguous, but she didn't bring any notarized documents, just some digital overlays that didn't match anything on record." "Did she give her name?" "Vivian Zellers," she said. She also claimed to be a licensed surveyor, but when we asked for her credentials, she suddenly had to take a call, left in a hurry." I thanked her, then started making calls. By noon, I'd spoken to 2 other homeowners, both of whom had received letters from the HOA claiming parts of their backyards needed to be cleared for community access. One guy, Mike, had already lost a section of his fence after a board member claimed it violated view corridor regulations. The HOA wasn't just coming for my driveway, they were trying to expand their control inch by inch, hoping no one would notice until it was too late. I called a friend from high school who worked in the city planning department. When I explained what was happening, she went quiet for a moment, then said, "Check the HOA's incorporation paperwork. If they've overstepped their registered purpose, you might be able to challenge their authority altogether." So I did. I pulled the HOA's articles of incorporation from the state registry and read them cover to cover. They were established as a nonprofit maintenance association, with authority limited strictly to the upkeep of shared spaces, no mention of easements, no right to redefine property lines, and absolutely no legal standing to challenge recorded parcels. They'd been bluffing. Worse, they were using HOA funds to do it. I printed everything: my plat map, the incorporation papers, and Vivian's boundary clarification form, and dropped them off at the county attorney's office. I also filed a formal complaint with the Department of Consumer Protection, citing misuse of funds and attempted fraudulent claims. The county attorney, a woman named Rachel Ng, called me the next day. "I've reviewed the documentation," she said. "You have a solid case." If the HOA continues this behavior, we'll open a formal investigation. In the meantime, I'd advise sending them a cease and desist letter." "I already drafted one," I said. "Want to see it?" she chuckled. "Send it over." "I'll make sure it has teeth." I hand-delivered the letter to Vivian the following morning. She opened the envelope, read the first paragraph, and paled. The last line was bolded. "Any further attempt to infringe upon my legal property will be met with civil and criminal action." She didn't say a word. But the next week, the HOA newsletter arrived thinner than usual and missing its usual section on compliance updates. Instead, there was a single paragraph at the bottom of page 2. "The board is currently reviewing its legal obligations regarding property boundaries and will suspend enforcement actions until clarification is obtained." That was their retreat, but I wasn't done. The next board meeting wasn't supposed to be public. But after 3 more neighbors approached me with eerie versions of the same story threats about shared access zones or letters implying their fences or sheds were non-compliant with proposed easement adjustments, I decided we weren't asking permission anymore. I printed 25 flyers and walked the neighborhood, knocking on doors. Quiet ones opened first: the retirees, the single parents, the folks who usually avoided drama because drama cost time and money. But they listened when I explained what was happening. I didn't use legal jargon. I just asked one question: "Do you know exactly where your property ends?" By evening, I had a dozen RSVPs. The board met every 4th Thursday in the clubhouse, a beige box of a building with flickering lights and a busted HVAC. It usually held 6 to 8 people. That night, 23 residents showed up, some with printed documents, some with photos of their markers, and one guy, Greg, with a folding chair because he refused to sit in anything HOA funded. Vivian didn't acknowledge the crowd at first. She sat at the center of the folding table with her usual pitcher of lemon water and a stack of manila folders. To her right was Larry, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His left leg twitched under the table. On her left was a new face, a man in a tailored black suit who introduced himself as general counsel for the board's land use compliance effort. He didn't give a name, just a title. That was my first red flag. Vivian tapped her pen against the table. "Before we begin tonight's agenda, I'd like to remind everyone that this is a working session of the board. Observers are welcome, but interruptions will not be tolerated." I raised my hand. "You planning to vote on any property access actions tonight?" Vivian hesitated. "That's board business." "Wrong," I said. "If any decision affects residents' property rights, it's public business." The man in the suit adjusted his cufflinks. "According to the HOA charter, the board retains authority to make preliminary adjustments to community-managed assets, including disputed boundaries." I pulled out a large envelope and walked to the front. "Here's the problem with that. None of these boundaries are disputed. You're manufacturing ambiguity where none exists." Vivian opened her mouth, but I laid out the documents directly in front of the man in the suit. "These are certified plats from the county. Every property line is clearly defined, recorded, and unchallenged until now. And you're using HOA funds to challenge them." He flipped through the papers, slower with each page, then he stopped. "What's this?" he asked, tapping a printed email. "A request to the county recorder's office," I said, "submitted under Vivian Zeller's name. She tried to file a boundary clarification on 5 different properties. The county flagged it for inconsistencies. That's not a mistake. That's a fraudulent claim under state law." Murmurs rippled through the room. Vivian stood. "That was a preliminary inquiry." "Nothing was filed." "False," I replied. "The request was submitted under the HOA's tax ID. That makes it an official action. And since it attempted to alter legal property lines without owner consent, that's misrepresentation." The man in the suit looked at her. "You didn't tell me it was filed." She didn't respond, then a voice from the back. My fence was cut last week. You said it was an accident. Everyone turned. It was Mike, the same guy who'd lost part of his backyard. He pulled out photos. You said it violated a corridor rule. But I checked the documents. There's no such rule. A second voice. They told me my tool shed was built on HOA land. A third. I got a letter saying my fire pit blocked emergency access. People were standing now, pulling out their own letters, photos, timelines. It wasn't just me. This had been happening for months quietly, selectively, always framed as enforcement or compliance, but aimed at carving out slivers of private property. Vivian's face hardened. This is all being wildly misinterpreted. The board has a duty to protect community harmony. That includes lying to the county, I asked. The man in the suit raised his hand. I need a recess. He and Vivian stepped into the hallway. Larry stayed behind, now visibly sweating. I walked over to the table and held up a final envelope. This is a formal complaint filed with the Department of Consumer Protection. It includes evidence of unauthorized expenditures, false filings, and misuse of board authority. Then I turned to the crowd. If your property was threatened or if you were coerced into removing structures under false pretenses, you're part of this complaint. Greg stood. I want in. So did Mike. Then a dozen more hands went up. The hallway door opened again. The man in the suit returned alone. Miss Zellers won't be returning tonight, he said, voice clipped. She's stepping down from all board-related roles effective immediately. I'll be notifying the board's insurer that a claim may be filed. People looked at each other in stunned silence. Then someone clapped, just once, then again. Then the room erupted. I didn't cheer. I was already thinking about what came next. The following morning, I received a call from Deputy Marquez. You might want to come down to the station, he said. We've opened a criminal investigation. I arrived 30 minutes later. He walked me into a low, windowed office where a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit had a whiteboard covered in lines and sticky notes. We pulled the HOA's financials for the last year, she said. There are withdrawals that don't match any approved expenses. Thousands routed through shell vendors, land services, surveyors, legal consulting. None of them real, I frowned. So the suit guy last night wasn't licensed in this state, she said. We ran his bar number, belongs to a man who died 4 years ago. I leaned back. Vivian hired a fake lawyer. She paid him using board funds, and she didn't stop there. We found requests submitted to the county under different names, forged signatures. She's looking at fraud, attempted extortion, and impersonating a legal officer. Marquez added, we'll need statements from residents, especially those who were told to remove property features under false authority. They already had a list. I recognized nearly every name. Over the next week, subpoenas were issued. The HOA's accounts were frozen. A temporary administrator was appointed by the state, and the board was suspended pending investigation. I was asked to serve on the interim committee, but I declined. Instead, I helped organize a neighborhood meeting, no formal agenda. No lemon water pitchers, just people sharing what they'd been pressured into, what they'd lost, and what they'd almost given up. Not a single person asked about dues or fences or flower beds. They asked how we could make sure this never happened again, so we drafted new bylaws. Transparent ones. We capped discretionary spending, required resident approval for land-related actions, and banned legal filings without a signed vote. We also added a provision. Any attempt to alter property lines without notarized owner consent would result in permanent removal from board eligibility. It passed unanimously. As for my gate still standing. Now with reinforced steel casing on the keypad, a motion-activated spotlight above it, and a sign that reads, Private Driveway. Not a suggestion, I still work nights. Still drink terrible coffee. Still come home to a quiet porch with a view of the gate that started it all. But now I sleep better, because we didn't just stop the HOA. We rewrote the rules. The investigation wrapped faster than anyone expected. Within 3 weeks, the county issued a formal notice dissolving the existing HOA board. A state-appointed auditor had uncovered nearly $72,000 in misappropriated funds, some spent on unauthorized property surveys, but most funneled into consulting retainers paid to entities that didn't exist. The fake lawyer. A drifter from out of state with a record for impersonation. He'd vanished 2 days before the board meeting and was now being sought on a state warrant. Vivian was arrested at her home early on a Tuesday morning. The new interim chairman, a retired civil engineer named Denise Coe, called me as the squad cars pulled away. She didn't go quietly, Denise said. Tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding and that she was being targeted for doing her civic duty. I didn't respond. I was already at the county courthouse, handing over the final set of affidavits from residents who had been coerced, threatened, or outright deceived. The DA's office was building a case for criminal conspiracy, and the assistant district attorney, a detail-obsessed man named Keller, had asked me to help organize the timeline of events. The more we unspooled, the uglier it got. Vivian hadn't just manipulated the board. She'd created a shadow policy group inside the HOA, an informal clique of 3 or 4 members, who communicated only through handwritten notes and unregistered email addresses. They called themselves the Continuity Committee and had drafted internal memos outlining plans to reclaim underutilized parcels and assert regulatory dominance through procedural saturation. Keller flipped the memo around and tapped the line with his pen. "This isn't just overreach," he said. "This is premeditated land fraud." The felony charges came down 2 days later: conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery of legal documents, misuse of nonprofit funds, attempted theft of real property. Vivian faced 12 counts. Larry faced 6. 2 other board members were charged with complicit negligence after it was revealed they'd signed blank checks and rubber-stamped expense approvals without review. The neighborhood felt different after that. Quieter, more awake. Denise scheduled a public forum in the community park, not in the clubhouse, which remained closed pending a full audit. Folding chairs circled a picnic table. No podiums, no scripts, just people. I didn't plan to speak. But when Denise asked for volunteers to help review and update the architectural guidelines, I stood. "Before we talk about fence colors or mailbox height," I said, "we need to lock down one thing: permanent protections for property lines. No interpretation, no appeals. Everything verifiable by county record." Greg, the guy with the folding chair from the board meeting, raised his hand. "We should require any board member to sign a personal liability acknowledgement before handling funds or documents." Another woman, Camille, added, "and bar anyone with a financial conflict of interest from holding a vote." I mean, half this started because someone wanted to boost their own lot value. Over the next hour, we drafted what would become the Community Integrity Charter, a binding set of rules layered on top of the existing bylaws. It required 2/3 approval for any land use policy, an independent resident auditor for all budget decisions, and mandatory legal review for anything involving property boundaries. We voted that night. Unanimous. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood transformed, not with paint or landscaping, but with trust. People who used to avoid meetings now showed up early. Fences got rebuilt with help. One neighbor replaced the bushes that had been dug up during Vivian's view corridor purge. Mike finally rebuilt his section of backyard with the help of 3 residents who brought extra lumber and a cooler of soda. The gate stayed up, not because it had to, but because it had earned its place. It had started as a boundary, a line drawn in defense, but now it was a symbol. A reminder that vigilance isn't hostility, it's responsibility. One afternoon, I came home to find Denise waiting by the mailbox with a manila folder. She handed it to me without a word. Inside was a letter from the county registrar officially rejecting the boundary clarification Vivian had attempted to file. At the bottom was a handwritten note from the clerk. "Verified, driveway is private, no further claims permitted." Denise pointed to a second envelope. That one's from the State Attorney General. I opened it slowly. It was a formal statement confirming that the HOA's previous board had violated multiple provisions of nonprofit governance law. As a result, the neighborhood would be placed under oversight for the next 18 months to ensure compliance and prevent any future misuse of authority. No one objected. We welcomed it. By the time fall rolled in, the neighborhood newsletter had changed too. No longer a passive-aggressive list of violations. It now featured resident spotlights, event announcements, and a small corner titled Know Your Rights, where each month a volunteer broke down one legal or procedural protection every homeowner should understand. The first article. Understanding Your Property Boundaries and Easement Rights. Written by me. Not because I wanted to be the face of anything, but because I remembered what it felt like to have someone stand on your property and tell you it wasn't yours. I ended the article with one sentence. Lines matter not because they divide us, but because they define what we're responsible for. The county trial of Vivian and the others began in early winter. I wasn't required to testify, but I sat in the back of the courtroom every single day. Vivian entered wearing a blazer 2 sizes too large and a look of practiced detachment. Larry looked older, smaller somehow, like the charges had compressed his spine. The prosecution laid everything out. The forged documents, the fake invoices, the attempts to alter legal filings under HOA letterhead. They brought in experts from the county planning office, the state nonprofit bureau, and even a cybersecurity analyst who traced the fake lawyer's email trail back to a burner laptop in Larry's garage. When the verdict came, it wasn't just guilty, it was unanimous. Vivian was sentenced to 4 years, with restitution ordered to repay every cent taken from the HOA. Larry received 2 years, suspended in exchange for full cooperation, and a sworn affidavit detailing everything the Continuity Committee had done. The courtroom emptied slowly. Denise and I stood by the exit. She'll appeal, Denise said. Probably, I replied, but she'll never be on a board again. No, I said, she won't. In the spring, I took down the motion spotlight above the gate. Not because I thought someone would try anything again, but because I didn't need it anymore. At the next community meeting, Camille brought cookies. Greg brought a new folding chair, this one with cup holders. And someone had hung a laminated copy of the Community Integrity Charter by the sign and table. None of us talked about Vivian. We didn't need to. Because the real story wasn't about her, or even about the gate. It was about the moment a neighborhood realized that silence wasn't safety. That when someone redraws your line literally or figuratively, you don't argue from the porch. You step forward, you bring your map, you prove them wrong.